Wonderful. All right, so thank you for coming. I'm going to go ahead and get started now. My name is Shayla Gutierrez, Garden Program Coordinator at Green Adventure. On the line today, I have Sadula, our guest volunteer, who will be monitoring the chat room for any questions. We have a few housekeeping items for those that might be new to Zoom. The mics are muted to ensure the quality of sound for today's session. Throughout the session, we do encourage you to use the chat room for conversation. And given that land ownership is inaccessible to many aspiring farmers, I'm excited to introduce our guest speaker. Sunil Livingston is a mixed race settler, farmer of Punjabi and Jewish descent, living and growing on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas outside of Hamilton, Ontario. Sunil is currently working for the National Farmers Union of Ontario as a land linking specialist and runs his own market garden operation, Feel Free Farm, off of rented land in Jerrsyville and Ayr, Ontario. Feel Free Farm specializes in salad greens, microgreens, and storage crop and sells through farmers markets and local retailers. Sunil will talk about the land linking work that the NFU is doing and talk about how he was able to find rented land to grow on near Hamilton. So Sunil, I'm going to turn the floor to you now.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the introduction and for the opportunity to speak today. I'm really excited to be here. I'm also glad we have a nice intimate audience today. I'm really good at spending time alone on the farm. Public speaking is not something I do a ton of. So glad to have kind of a smaller audience that feel free to turn on your cameras or anything. Yeah, so I'm Sunil. As Shayla said, I farm at Feel Free Farm, and which is my kind of small farm business. And I also have just been hired over the winter for a winter contract doing land linking work with the NFUO. So I'm gonna drop a link into the chat here, and that's just the notes that I'm gonna be using for the presentation. So feel free to follow along, and then it also has some links at the very bottom, some hyperlinks at the bottom of that page that I'll refer to during the presentation, so you have those later for your reference if you want to check them out. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and jump into it. Great. So yeah, as I said, I'm Sunil. Work at Feel Free Farm. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about my journey into agriculture. Then I'll tell you about the National Farmers Union and kind of go in depth into the land linking work that we're doing. But I just wanted to start out with a land acknowledgement. Through my farm, I farm in Jerrsyville and Ayr, Ontario. And I live here in Ancaster. So all around Hamilton, kind of like the triangle between what we call Hamilton, Brantford, and Cambridge today. So I'm really grateful to live and grow on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas. And this is land that's covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, which was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe to share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. So I was introduced to agriculture back in 2016 while I was working for the city of Hamilton when I went down to the McQuestion Urban Farm in the east end of the city, which is just an incredible place. I don't know how many of you all are already familiar with the McQuestion Urban Farm, but it's definitely worth checking out. They do some like incredible education and a ton of growing over there. Yeah, so I did a little bit of volunteering there, and I was really inspired by the impact of the farm in the community. And I also just like intrinsically enjoyed working with my hands in the soil. So when my contract with the city ended, I pursued an internship at Manor Run Organic Farm, here in Hamilton on Highway 52 in between Jerrsyville and Governor's Road. So during my internship there, I met a fellow named Sean from the Chicopee Permaculture Apiary. And some of you may already be familiar with Sean. He's pretty active in growing communities. So after my internship, I worked with Sean, and he kind of like, it was employment, but it was also like sort of an apprenticeship. He took a ton of effort to really help me learn more about growing and market gardening in particular. And the following year, I went back to work at Manor Run part-time and partnered up with Sean, and we continued to grow. I rented some land from the field manager at Manor Run, Naomi Kruger, who's the eldest daughter of the farm family there. She had just bought a property in Linden, so I rented a small plot from her and worked at Manor Run part-time while growing food on that plot part-time. And together, Sean and I sold the food at the Ancaster and Dundas farmers markets. So since then, I've continued to work at Manor Run up until last season, part-time as kind of a lead hand and sometimes field manager in the absence of the daughters of the farm family there. And today I rent land for an infrastructure from Sean. He's stepped away from farming to kind of focus on full-time work in the city. He's got a beautiful young daughter, so he's just trying to spend more time with his family. So he stepped away from the farm for now, and in the meantime, he's allowed me to use the land and infrastructure on his property, which has been just absolutely crucial. And he actually doesn't charge me rent. He's really just happy to see the land continue to be animated and kind of maintained. I do my best to control the weeds and prevent things from kind of getting away from me there. So this is the production property in Jerrsyville, where I really focus on salad greens and microgreens there. And then about halfway through the season, I realized I needed a bit more land. So I approached a young farmer named Ben Constable of Fresh Air Farm in Ayr, Ontario. And we had interned together at Manor Run in 2017. He had come from a background in engineering consulting before making the transition into farming. So he kind of like, he had a reasonable kind of savings account when he stepped into farming. So he had a farm, he had a tractor, lots of equipment. So I approached Ben. I said, listen, I need more land. I need to grow more food. Let's make a deal. So we used his land and his equipment, and I did most of the work. And we grew a ton of food and split the food. So we sort of, in some ways you could say I rented the land with using my labor, or in other ways you could say it was a cooperative farming model. But either way, we got it done and it worked out great. Allowed me to grow lots more food. So we broke ground there in July of last season, and it let me grow lots of storage crop, tons of carrots, beets, and radish that kind of helped me make the step towards making my farm business a year-round business that can hopefully pay the bills. So yeah, that's a bit about me and how I sort of got into agriculture and how I've been able to find places to grow and maintain in order to maintain a farm business. And everything I grow, I sell at the Ancaster Farmers Market, which is a 2-minute walk from where I live, and it's about a 12-minute drive from Sean's place in Jerrsyville. So it feels really good to be able to sell so close to where I'm growing all of the food. When I was growing with Sean, we sold at Dundas Farmers Market as well, which is a bit farther, but still incredibly close in the context of the food system. And so, yeah, I hope to be able to grow the farm back up to the size that we could go back to the Dundas Farmers Market. So, yeah, that's kind of a bit about me. So I'll tell you now about the National Farmers Union and the land linking work that they do. So I was just hired this winter by the NFUO, And the NFUO is an accredited farm organization here in Ontario. In Ontario, we have 3 accredited farm organizations: the NFU, the OFA, and the last one is, I think, the CFO. OFA is Ontario Federation of Agriculture, I believe. CFO is the Christian Farmers CFA Association, or I don't know the exact acronyms, but if any farmer in Ontario that makes more than $7,000 has to join an accredited farm organization. So the National Farmers Union is one of those organizations, and the thing that I find notable about the NFUO is I feel like of the 3 organizations, they have more of a progressive leaning, and that there's lots of work that the NFU does around rights for migrant farmers, migrant laborers, and things like that. And they don't take any corporate money or political money or make political promises or associate with any political parties. So the NFU is really free to really work in the grassroots model, where they're putting out statements that the membership wants them to put out, not putting out statements that corporate money is buying or anything like that. So that's a little bit about the NFUO. And they have, for the past about 1.5 or 2 years, started organizing around land linking. And their work has been kind of gaining momentum since then. And we're learning a lot from established, successful organizations around North America. So in BC in particular, there's been a really successful land matching program that's actually funded by the province there. So it's quite institutionalized. It's very comprehensive. They have regional land matchers that kind of will go out and do site visits and help folks set up lease agreements and this kind of thing. So we're learning a lot from them. It's been really great to have the support of Darcy, the coordinator there, and kind of understanding good strategies for getting started, since we're just at the beginning of this work here in Ontario, just understanding the best practices and strategies. And one of our main tools that we use is this land access guide, which is linked down at the bottom of the notes document that I shared with you all. So this land access guide was created in BC, and then the NFU adopted it for Ontario. And it's a really good starting point for anyone interested in getting into agriculture. It outlines strategies for training and skill development, business planning, farm planning, and goes a little bit into leasing land and how to find land, things like that. And another one of our main tools for the land linking work is this land linking questionnaire that we've been distributing. And this is also linked in the bottom of the notes document for anyone interested in filling this out. So we've been using this questionnaire to kind of establish a database of landholders and land seekers. And from there, we can sort the data geographically and reach out to folks and make connections where appropriate, and then try to facilitate land partnerships as best as we can. So this is the strategy that we've sort of been taking so far. And through this work, we've had tons of conversations with the landholders and land seekers that are filling out our questionnaire, and also folks that have created successful land partnerships, existing land partnerships here in Ontario, to learn what has allowed those partnerships to succeed, and how can we replicate those partnerships. So we've identified a couple of things. We've identified some barriers to success, and those, the 3 top barriers that we've identified to successful land partnerships are isolation, housing, and skill development. So to speak a bit more about isolation, often new farmers don't come from farming backgrounds. They're coming from urban areas and making like a career shift into farming, or coming to farming from a place of without many rural community connections. So relocating to remote communities can feel incredibly isolating if you're moving away from your network in the city. And this is especially true, we've found, for BIPOC farmers, just because the 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 number of BIPOC, there's the communities of BIPOC people in rural areas are so much more sparse in general than in the cities, that it can be really difficult and isolating, is what we found from these conversations. Then housing options can be extremely limited. So there's often a plot with some great infrastructure, access to irrigation and things like that, but it's hard for the new farmer to activate that plot because there's no housing within a reasonable commuting distance if it's kind of far from any community with apartment rentals and things like that. The last barrier that we've identified is skill development. And that's what we'll hear often is, I'm not ready to be matched with land yet. I need to do a little bit more learning, gain more experience, but this is something that I'm interested in doing down the road. So that's also because we're kind of experiencing a shift in farming demographics where new farmers are not coming from farming backgrounds often. So those are the barriers, but we've also been able to identify keys to success. So what makes it possible for a new farmer to get out onto a plot of land and activate it, grow food, and make a living? Keys to success are established business plans and farm plans. The land seeker having a well thought out business plan and farm plan of what are they going to grow, how are they going to grow it, how are they going to market it, how are they going to sell it. Having this kind of financial vision for the plan for the farm is crucial to a successful land partnership. Prior farming experience is really important too. So employment on a farm or doing a farm apprenticeship or farm internship before diving into a land partnership, we found has lent towards more successful land partnerships. Being connected to a farm network or a farm community, we found is crucial. So there's lots of great farm networks out there. The EFAO is a great farm network. The CRAFT network, the Canadian Regional Alliance for Farmer Training. So we found that folks who are cued into or connected into farm organizations or farm networks and communities tend to have more successful land partnerships because they're supported by the community. They have people to reach out to ask questions and ask for help and things like that. And then specific to landholders is the internalized desire to support new farmers. And I can kind of point to the example between Sean and I. He is really just motivated to see his land grow food and to support a new farmer in their success. And that sort of internalized motivation is something that has been identified as being like very crucial to a successful land partnership on the landholder side of the equation. And we've also identified two major models of land linking. So the first one is out of farm succession. And this is when a farmer is retiring, there's no one in the family that wants to take over the farm, and the farmer does not want to sell the farm land for development. Then you have out of family farm succession. The farm is either sold or passed on to a new farmer who will continue to activate the land for agriculture, or farm plot leasing. And this is a landholder who has some extra space, maybe a couple acres or as little as a quarter of an acre or an eighth of an acre that a new farmer can have access to kind of start out a farm business. So what are we doing with all of this information? One of the main things that we've been working on is a webinar series that is based on breaking down the barriers that we have identified. So we've done presentations on land matching for BIPOC farmers, on keys to successful land partnership. We've done webinars on the principles of farm succession planning. And as we get new information, we continue to run these series. So we usually do a webinar series in the fall and a webinar series in the winter. So at the kind of right before the farming season starts and right after the farming season ends. And this has been a huge tool of outreach for us, that we can kind of reach out to more people through these webinars, but also disseminate the information and try to build capacity to break down the barriers that we're identifying. So our next webinar series is actually starting next week, and it's based on after every webinar we give out a survey to see what folks want to learn more about, and there's been an overwhelming demand for a webinar series on farm financing. So that's what we have coming up over the next couple of weeks. Here is a series of webinars on farm financing, culminating with our last webinar on Thursday, March 3rd, is taking place during the NFU's AGM. And that's just going to be a kind of overview of what we've learned so far from the land linking work that we've been doing. So that's one thing. One part of the work is organizing these webinars, getting together panelists that can directly address the barriers that people are experiencing and try to empower people to break through those barriers. We're also doing lots of outreach to build our database of landholders and land seekers. The more people we have on our spreadsheet, the more likely that we will have a positive connection, is kind of the idea there. And the last thing that we're doing with all of this information is resource amalgamation. So we have a web developer on right now. We're hoping to launch a revamped website within the next month or two here. And a big that is to have resources available for new farmers with the sort of information that we've been kind of getting demand for. So information on co-op models for farming, growing resources, business planning resources, marketing strategies. These are all the things that we have people contacting us to get support on. And so that's a big part of what we're doing with all of this information. So that's an overview of the land linking work that we're doing, a little bit about the NFU itself. And down at the bottom of the document here, I have just these hyperlinks for you all if you want to check out any of this stuff that I've talked about. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and if you all have any questions, I can hopefully provide some answers.
Thanks for sharing, Sunil. On our last presentation, we heard from Allison Eady, who does some work with youth around gardening. And one of the things that she mentioned was that folks don't even know that agriculture or, that it's a viable career option. So, you just didn't know that gardening or things can be a career option. So that's really encouraging to hear that these resources are available. So I'm going to open the floor now. So Deborah, go ahead.
Thanks, Shayla. Hi, Sunil. I'm Deborah Boyd. I actually met you a couple of years ago through Cynthia Meyer when we were sourcing wood for your mushroom beds. So I have two questions. One, how are your mushroom beds doing? And what's your experience been with that? Because fungi is such a vital part of regenerating not just the soil, but sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. And the other question is, how many new farmers do you think are in the community right now? Like how many? Do you have a sense of numbers around that? Just curious about that. Thank you so much for your presentation, Sunil, for taking the time to put it together and share the information with us. It was just awesome.
Thank you, Deborah, and it's good to see you again. So first question first, I have found I am not a good mushroom farmer. I'm not gonna lie to you. But that being said, I think I'm an okay mushroom gardener, I suppose. I get enough mushrooms from my logs to feed myself and feed my friends. I'm not taking many mushrooms to market. Yeah. Yeah, so that's an honest answer to the question. Yeah, there's definitely things I could have done better, but it didn't become a huge part of the business. But I have enjoyed some delicious shiitake mushrooms, just on a personal basis. So a little bit of a failure, but also a success, I guess, in the context of feeding yourself and your friends. Yeah, so that's the mushroom answer. And then to answer your question about new farmers in the community, and just to get a little clarification, do you mean like our community here around Hamilton?
Yeah, or yes, if you know that information, or in Ontario in general, or just, yeah.
Okay, so my answer to you is going to be based purely on conjecture, but I would say that there's dozens of us. There's a couple of new farms, like notable new farms that have lots of employees, are Paradise Fields. So they are really helping develop like a new generation of farmer by providing viable employment. Like it's a living wage employment for farm workers. I will say that our NFU local 351 is going to have an AGM soon. And we're doing our best to gather as many new farmers as possible. And once we have the date, we'll distribute an invitation, and coming to the AGM would be a great opportunity to meet some new farmers. Yeah, so not much of an answer, but the best answer that I think that I could give you.
That's a great answer. Thank you. And if there are ways that we can support the new farmers, that would be awesome as well. Is Paradise Farms up on the east end of the city?
That's Binbrook. It's in Binbrook. So kind
Binbrook.
of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, for sure.
Neil, was that Paradise Fields Farm?
Yeah, Paradise Fields Farm.
So that I can put that in the chat. And then Sam, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me? So thank you, Sunil, for the presentation. I would consider myself a new farmer, so very new actually. I just started last year on a small scale, and I think I heard you mention in your presentation that there were some options for smaller plots, so 1 acre potentially. And I was wondering, in terms of the program that does the land linking that you're involved in, how much of that would potentially be the smaller plots of land that a newer farmer like myself would probably have more success with. So I'm talking about 1 acre or so. And then just for some context, I'm also not in the Hamilton area. I'm closer to Toronto at the moment. So I wonder if the program extends out this far.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So it's great to meet you, Sam. Always good to meet a new farmer. It's an Ontario-wide program, and there are so that we don't have any landholders, unfortunately, right now in cities. We're working with Conestoga College to potentially get a couple plots in Toronto that would be like along public transit lines and really accessible. But there are some plots that are within driving distance. So I am going to direct message you my contact info. Actually, I'll just put my email address into the chat for everyone, and let's get connected. if you send me an email, then we can arrange a time for a phone call sometime this week and see what might work well for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you reaching out. I'm just typing my email in the chat right now.
Thanks, Neil. So I have a question. So you mentioned that, I believe this is the figure I heard, that a farmer who makes $7,000 has to then join an accredited farm. So before that farmer makes that $7,000, like what, I guess the question is, would that farmer kind of need to go through that whole process of business planning before starting to get there? And if so, does this, like, if you are a land seeker, is there then supports like mentorships available with this NFU program?
Great question. So we don't have a mentorship program. We only have 4 staff people at the NFUO. So what we try to do is we have access to a community of very talented farmers. So when people contact us with questions, we don't have all the answers, but what we try to do is connect that farmer to a union member who would know the answer to that question and can give the best answer. So in that way, there's maybe some informal mentorship that may take place. We don't have, as of right now, an official or formal mentorship program for new farmers within the NFU. The way that, so there's the Ontario Beekeeping Association. Beekeepers in Ontario have to join the Ontario Beekeeping Association, and any new member that joins is paired up with an older member as sort of like an apprenticeship or mentorship program. So we don't have that model and the NFU, but we do try to have like a more informal sort of system where if you contact us and you need support in marketing, then there's a very active union member who does great marketing on their farm, and they're open to sort of giving help to folks. So we connect them with that person. So to talk about the business registration in particular, we always suggest that no matter how much income your farm is generating, it's always good to have a business plan or a farm plan. And there's tons of places. If you're in a rural area, there's rural economic development centers that you can go to for free to help you set up your business plan. And then here in Hamilton, there's some great small business supports out of City of Hamilton and different organizations downtown that there's resources out there for getting support to write a business plan. And even if you're just selling to family and friends, you know, and you make $30 or something, it's nice to have a vision, a documented vision. Once you make the $7,000, it's really just a bureaucratic thing. So when you register for your farm business, you get something called an FBR, and you use that on your taxes. And it's mostly for taxes. It means that you're filing your taxes as an agricultural business, which has certain ramifications, like you don't pay HST. And if you file your tax with a farm business number, your property taxes is reduced quite a bit as well. So it's more so a bureaucratic thing, but it can be a great tool as well for land seekers. If you have that farm business number, it's something that you can offer. So when in the past, I've leased pasture for cattle, and the way that I was able to do that, I was able to lease the pasture for free by letting the landowner there, who is a doctor that just happened to own a 40-acre farm. They weren't doing any farming, but they were paying property tax on 40 acres. So when I put my cattle there and let them use my farm business number, it meant they paid much less on their property tax, and they were motivated to have a farmer tenant, so to say. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, wonderful. Is there anyone else who has a question? Anne, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for the presentation, Sunil. It's really interesting. There's can't wait until we can get out of the house again. It's nice to see your face again. I've really enjoyed buying veggies from your Dundas Farmers Market. You're always like really just a pleasant to be around. So no, I just had like maybe a self-explanatory answer or question. So like the increased cost of land, basically, especially I'm thinking here in Hamilton and the surroundings, do you see that affects the ability to find this land? That there's a lot of speculation in what can be developed and that makes it harder to find land to farm, basically. Have you seen that trend?
Yeah, absolutely. The cost of land is a huge a huge barrier to access to land, and it leads to a lot of farmland kind of disappearing, especially like just here in Hamilton. We just beat the development. Stop Sprawl Hamilton was successful, right? But often, if you're trying to get out of farming, so I worked for a farmer who will remain anonymous, but just to give an impression of what's happening. So the farmer, while I was working for him, he turned 60. I said, at some point you'll retire. Will you pass the farm on to your son? And he said, well, it'll be up to my son if he wants to take on the debt or not, right? So that's like how he answered the question. He didn't think of the farm as a farm, he thought of it as debt. So in that situation, it's very difficult. It doesn't make the farmer a bad person if they choose to sell the farm to a developer at that point, because it's the only option to clear the debt and not leave a ton of debt for the right. So it's not the fault of the farmer for selling to a developer, but the inflated land prices definitely leave folks with few opportunities and diminishing farmland, especially here around like right around the urban center. So we're lucky to have the Greenbelt, which is provincially protected farmland, but even that is being challenged. So it's super important. The developers that were beat here in Hamilton moved on to Halton. So there's a Stop Sprawl Halton movement now. Because developers also they'll often buy up tracts of farmland in anticipation of the urban boundary being expanded and that farmland available to develop on. And that leads to a strange dynamic of sort of medieval tenant farming, where farmers own a very small parcel of land, but they're farming thousands of acres that are owned by developers or I'm going a bit maybe into it and coloring it, projecting my own opinions onto my answer, but I don't think anything I've said is untrue. And to answer your question, yes, the inflated land prices, it's a huge barrier for new farmers to get in and just for farmland to remain in general. Farmland.
Well, thank you for that. It's like an interesting dynamic, right? It's definitely also like the way that we're valuing or undervaluing farmland versus putting houses on. I just had a little bit of a side question, is that okay, Sheila? So I'm originally from Denmark, and I followed as a bit of a movement, and I think like translated it would be like co-op farms, basically, where the general public basically buy almost like a CSA, but more directed. They're literally paying a monthly fee that can go into this organization that can buy farms, and then they have a designated usually a couple of people that are like managing that farm, but it's basically owned by a co-op. It's a little bit of a different model than what you described, but would you, just out of curiosity, would that be something you think that could be a format going forward as well?
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I don't see why not.
Yeah,
Yeah, especially if there were enough people interested to contribute money.
because I think that there's a huge interest in I feel you could see that on the farmers markets, that there is an interest in buying local food, but then there is this like versus development and like these dynamics that are just not necessarily supporting that. And then there's just this huge barrier for entering the market for smaller farmers. So yeah.
No, yeah, I think that's a really interesting model, and I'm just gonna make a note to look into it.
But Ignite, I might be pronouncing this.
Ignatius Farm and Growth
Farm, right? They kind of have some type of model like that where they have kind of that farmers can come onto the fields and learn and then rent that plot land. And if you're not ready to commit to those acres of land, you can then kind of have that membership of their community garden while still getting those benefits. So, but I don't think there's something like that in Hamilton just yet. I'm going to say yet, because I do believe that there is an increasing need and keenness in Hamilton youth and just Hamiltonians wanting to have that local access to fresh produce. So I'm hopeful. So yeah, Sunil, that was really some valuable content that you provided. If there's no further questions, that is all the time that we have now. So I just want to express my gratitude to Sunil for joining us and sparking this conversation. It was really, really engaging, and for all of you for being so open and keeping an open mind in what we can accomplish or see in the future. So thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.